Hello and welcome to episode 2 of the Filmmaking Behind, a series where we break down video game cutscenes and dissect filmically how they work and why. Today we're looking at the man in Mario's shadow with his very first game, Luigi's Mansion. What's up guys, it's Daz here, but you don't really care. Let's watch. So right off the bat, something I really wish Nintendo kept up with in their more later games is adding something extra to the logo screens before the game starts. This one is pretty easy to get. We have a demonic voice saying the company's name, Nintendo, hitting us immediately with a minor sense of fear we'll be getting from this ghostly game. And while this next bit isn't so much a cutscene, I would like to talk about it briefly. The title screen. It starts with a slow transition from black to give us this low-lit image of the mansion. The general design of the mansion in itself gives that sense of danger with the spiny leafless trees to the side, the almost angry eyes created with the two lit windows, and the roof protrusions, and of course the blackness everywhere. It really helps to add to that feeling of, do I really want to enter in here? And when the actual title comes up, we have that low note bringing it in as well as that intimidating synth music. Really, just a masterfully constructed introduction in my opinion. Anyway, with that out of the way, let's jump into the first actual cutscene. So the scene has Luigi nervously walking up to the mansion. The camera starts off looking towards the gloomy sky before panning down onto Luigi, who in comparison to the entire frame is tiny. All the evil trees surrounding him are shown in full view and so are shown to completely tower over him. And even as the camera moves somewhat closer to Luigi, he continues to remain insignificant in size. These camera choices were obviously chosen to make Luigi seem out of his depth and very much not in control of the situation. The sky is grey, the trees menacing, and him just a little pipsqueak next to them. At the end of this shot, Luigi is positioned between two particular trees which arc away from each other to give us a kind of potion shape. Regardless of the actual potion aspect, this is a common cinematic technique used in filmmaking known as frame within a frame, because it's, well, a frame within a frame. These can have a variety of purposes, usually dependent on the context of the scene, which in this case is used to make Luigi seem contained, or perhaps even watched in some manner. And at a stretch, you could maybe bring up the shape of the frame as it's kind of teardroppy. I don't know if there's anything in particular to note here, but if you were writing some essay about it, you could perhaps try and push how it's slightly reminiscent of a boo, or again a teardrop symbolizing sadness, though I personally wouldn't believe it. Once Luigi disappears behind this framing, we jump to the next shot looking from Luigi's point of view. There's not too much to say from this moment here as it simply shows the path and a couple elements down the path. At a stretch you could call this foreshadowing though, but not really. Instead we look down at Luigi's pamphlet of the mansion he has supposedly won. This pamphlet is supposed to let us know the majority of the backstory for this game, though later on the character Egad will be sure to spell it out in a spew of dialogue in case you miss it. The big "your mansion" is supposed to grab your attention and tell you that Luigi's mansion is Luigi's, and that Luigi is expecting a much nicer scenery judging by the bright and colourful design of the rooftop and the cliché rainbow and just the general page. Beyond that, we see that Luigi has been following the path to get to the mansion as shown by his finger. Also, something to note is we never actually see the river Luigi crossed. Not an important detail, but I never really thought about it before. Anyway, with a tap of his finger and a pan up, we see that Luigi's expectations are tarnished, with well-timed thunderbolts to boot. The music assisting this moment also assists in driving this theme as it begins with a nice high-pitched twinkling instrument before concluding with a much lower and intimidating instrument. The camera then begins to move towards the mansion in order to make it more central to the frame, in order to assist with the transition to the next shot, which is much closer up. It also helps to keep movement in between transitions to give a nice sense of smoothness. Once again, there are only two windows lit up again, creating this vague angry face from the mansion. As the camera moves down, we also see more elements of the mansion: gravestones, blue flames, and a spiky gate. Not the most inviting place. Also, I couldn't help but notice that the camera movement looks a little bit weird. I'm not sure if this was an intentional effect or simply the game's engine, but as the camera moves down and backwards, the perspective of the shot starts to warp and change too. It almost looks as if the whole scene is on a curved surface that we're just looking down. This could also be an effect of zooming the camera at the same time as moving in, or at least that's how it would work in real life, though I won't go into too much detail about this kind of shot here, as it may not quite be what is occurring right now. Still though, this effect faintly gives the sense that the mansion is moving farther away from Luigi, making the walk up to the door more and more uninviting. And once again, Luigi is an insignificant figure here. The mansion looms over him completely. Next shot we have a couple of crows watching menacingly. This is a common trope to have these kind of animals around as they symbolize evil people. Think Dracula. Though it doesn't actually tell us much other than that it portrays more of this evil theme, though I feel like their sound effects are of ducks and not crow. They also don't appear on any of the previous trees we've seen, so who knows where they're watching from. As Luigi slowly climbs the little steps, the camera copies his pacing by panning only very slightly to the right, which alongside the diagonal angle contributes to create this off sense, and builds up the suspension of what's inside the mansion. The music helps too, as it retains its low-pitched and menacing tone, and plays slowly. And once again, Luigi's puny. Then we once again jump into Luigi's point of view. Now that I think about it, the repetition of this works to keep the cinematography consistent in the cutscene, as well as keeps up with the gameplay aspects of the game too, as we spend a lot of time watching above and behind Luigi, but can change to first person with the Game Boy Horror. Cool. Anyway, the shot continues that off-angled slow movement to the door, featuring a skull on it. We can also hear Luigi's cautiously slow footsteps, though if we were truly looking from his perspective, surely the camera would dip with each step. Next, we jump to the other side of the door, breaking the 180-degree rule completely. However, this is commonly used when it comes to doors, as the door itself helps orientate the audience. Though this also works to build the suspense, as even though we're inside the mansion, we don't get to see what's inside the mansion. Once again, we do get to see that classic frame within a frame, and it's much more defined this time. The doors create a small rectangle for Luigi to peer his head through. Quite iconic, this shot too. Symbolically, it could also show that he is closed off and swamped in mystery, as he has such little control over the overall frame. Plus, he's scared. Once inside, not too much happens, but we keep up with keeping Luigi far from the camera as it moves across the screen to give us a view of the place. It also breaks the 180-degree rule multiple times here to add that sense of confusion and dread onto the player. I do like, though, how the cuts are done in time with the music. Creates a nice flow. And then, we're into gameplay. Once the key is revealed, we're given this weird music, giving us that ghostly vibe as well as a slow pan onto a figure we can't quite see. The slow and smooth pan adds to make us feel uncomfortable as it isn't tracking the figure directly, and moves us audience members close to it, which isn't exactly what you'd want at this moment in time. It then briefly moves back to show Luigi quivering in his shoes, though I don't think there's a significant point to this actual movement. Once we're back to the figure, we begin moving closer again until the ghost flees off screen. Here we see the camera is focused on the key rather than the ghost as it pans down to show us where it landed. These kinds of shots are common in films as it acts to establish the exact position of a prop to be referenced back to later. Back to the ghost, the camera continues to faintly follow the figure but continues its slow panning and unfocused attention to continue that sense that the ghost is ungraspable. The music builds for the ghost's next move. And once beyond the door, the camera zooms in to really drive where the ghost has gone before. And a super zoom into a close-up of the key alongside a discovery motif. By the way, the whole associating things with musical cues are called motifs, not leitmotifs. Those, I believe, are when a similar musical cue is remade in another format, perhaps with different instruments. If I'm wrong on that assumption, please correct me. It's better to be making these mistakes earlier in the series, I feel. Anyway, now we are back to the gameplay again. Now I really want to say something about this key opening cutscene, but there really isn't too much to say. It's slow-paced and quiet to build up all that suspense of what's behind the door, but beyond that, not much is there. We do have a nice reflection of the door handle to create a slightly intimidating vibe as we can see motion within it, and Luigi's shivering hands add to that fear factor, but beyond that, there really isn't much to say, which is a shame because I really like it. Anyway, now we're in the room and Luigi is given at least a little more space in the frame compared to earlier. Though this could mostly be because of the enclosed area being played with since we are indoors at this point. The music is silent and we only have this odd whistling sound as the camera pans to follow Luigi, before subtly moving ahead of him to push him to the far left side of the frame in order to open up the appearance of... Immediately, the gold ghost is way bigger than Luigi. He has control. Though through the expressionism of this game, Luigi mimics his size accidentally by stretching out to emphasize his fear. In the next shot, we get to see Luigi fully landing on his butt and look up onto the gold ghost. As we saw in Mario Sunshine, by having the gold ghost control the top half of the frame, the developers show that he has complete control over the situation. This shot also keeps up with having the hero on the left and the villain on the right. Furthermore, Luigi is edging further off screen as he becomes less significant and the gold ghost grows larger and larger on the frame. Until he is pulled away from his position, placed more central to the frame, and clearly chained down by the wind of the poltergust. The camera here does something interesting, whereby it stays where it is and changes angle from a direct anchor point. We've only seen this previously going in one direction, perhaps left or right, but this time the camera turns right, down, and zooms in a bit. This to me creates a really interesting effect where it truly feels like you're a spectator of the event rather than a floating camera. It's like you're actually in the room and turning your head to focus on the action. Anyway, now Egad is center frame and happy to be there. Next, we see the gold ghost attempting to flee Egad. The shots aren't particularly groundbreaking. The camera just pans to somewhat follow the action. Once the ghost counterattacks though, the camera is much lower to the ground, copying Egad's current position, and again putting the gold ghost up high to give him that last bout of power. This shot also goes on to show that Luigi is hiding behind a table. Therefore, he is insignificant to both the action and the frame as he is only partially visible, and Egad is center of the attention as he becomes larger on the frame when he is hit. The gold ghost is less focused on here as he is split in half by the dimensions of the shot. Only in the next shot does the ghost become important again as he is center frame and moves upwards when he disappears. Moving closer to Egad for his dialogue has something interesting that I can't really explain. The camera bounces up and down slightly. Is it supposed to represent Luigi's motions, or maybe is it just glitching over the table? I don't know. Once the two begin interacting, we can finally see that Luigi is given a nice amount of frame to control. It's not major, but at the very least, the ghosts aren't plaguing his life at this exact moment. Well, that lasted long. The ghosts are center frame, heading towards the camera and obviously getting larger. And yet, because of the over-the-shoulder shot that follows, Egad and Luigi still retain a bit of control as they are placed between the camera and the ghosts. Though they are still looking up at them, it is much less defined. This shot makes them seem more like invincible spectators, or maybe that's just because they're not reacting much. And the shot ends with the ghosts taking almost the entire frame. Also, Egad's poltergeist wiring is still in the corner. Interestingly, this game likes to freeze the action before fading to black. This effect kind of adds to the slightly ominous tone as we're falling back into the darkness, though I find the freezing time thing makes things less suspenseful, as the danger is immediately dropped upon freezing. Moving on, we're going to briefly talk about whenever Luigi re-enters the mansion. The scene begins with a simple shot of the mansion. It stays to the right since it's the enemy, and a flash of lightning to keep that sense of evilism. Egad is then shown to be waving and smiling by his shed as the camera slowly pans out. This shot is often used in horror or creepy situations to insinuate that a character is disingenuous, as it makes the character seem as though they are expecting worse things for the protagonist that they are not telling them. And to be fair, Luigi doesn't know the full extent of what he's gonna face like Egad does, so perhaps this is all true. Even if not, it keeps up that unnerving feeling for the game. The camera movement continues from behind Egad again, breaking that 180-degree rule, and we see Luigi as a little speck on the frame. And then we have a mostly repeated scene segment of slowly entering the building. And back to gameplay. Now we're going to jump ahead a little bit to the end of Area 1 in the game, to the introduction of Chauncey, the baby's room. It starts with the sound of Chauncey crying in his room as the camera quickly slides from Luigi to a view of the door, which then cuts to a head-on shot of the door which pans up and away from it before zooming in on the beat. The camera movements add to fully show off the door and give it that sense of significance as we are once again looking up at it slightly, and it dominates the frame. There's also a little motif to associate with Chauncey, and in particular his xylophone instrument, which will be coming up real soon. By that I mean right now, as we're going to move on to the introduction of Chauncey's boss fight. We start up from White, looking up Luigi's nose to draw the audience's attention fully onto Luigi. This is all to build up on the fact that though Luigi seems normal in regards to the frame now, he's actually way smaller than beforehand, just as Chauncey wanted. The super wide and low angle also helps to emphasize this more. And then next we have an angle looking harshly down on Luigi, truly putting him in his place, alongside that xylophone to tell you who's putting him there. And again, Luigi falls back in fear over Chauncey's cry, which the background changes alongside, by the way. and the camera curves around Luigi to show what he's reacting to. This motion of course adds tension, and there's elements of foreshadowing as we can see Chauncey's horses before Chauncey himself. The camera stays as low to the ground as possible when Chauncey raises from beyond the bars as the music turns synthy to build up his final reveal that he's not a happy baby. The close-up on Chauncey's body alongside the now fully black background and stretching face all add to make Chauncey dominate the entire frame. There is nothing else. And so he has the most power out of every character we've seen up to this point. Makes sense since he's the strongest one too. And as we pull back to reality slightly, we see Luigi is still puny compared to Chauncey, and the fight is brewing. Also a lovely little wink. Why? I don't know. Perhaps to indicate that he is a key, because that is the sound effect, or maybe just to add a little bit of out-of-place humor. Or to make him a tad less intimidating compared to what he usually is. I'm not really too certain about it. Anyway, with a final spinning punch, we get a foreshadowing of another of Chauncey's attacks, and we're thrown right back into baby-beating gameplay. So finally, let's have a look at the ghost portrificationizer scene. The first and one of few actually light-hearted scenes for Luigi. Instead of having the camera pan in spontaneous weird angles, we simply get nice and smooth pans following the movement of the ghosts as they are pressed through the machine. The camera then quickly moves closer to the viewing of the washing machine moment of the process, keeping an over-the-shoulder view of the two to again give them that invincible spectator power as it continues to curve around and away from the window. Next, the camera moves as if it's contained on a railing or a dolly track in real life to create this sense of control and organization. The music also has a much more upbeat and triumphant tone to it. And the scene concludes with Luigi jumping through the fourth wall into full darkness, with only his flashlight illuminating the ghostly data. There's not really much else to say about this statistic screen, but it's an interesting portrayal of the data, and is clearly an attempt to keep up with the light in the darkness theme of Luigi in the game. Thanks for watching, I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, consider checking out my other video on the series. There's only one other one, but hey, you gotta start from somewhere. For a 4-hour game, there sure is a lot to talk about with the cutscenes, and I've only scratched the surface of what even occurs, so perhaps I'll make a part 2 to this video at some point in the future. As for now, we've run out of time, but before you leave, I have a couple of requests for you. First things first, I've been changing up the formula for this series as you may have seen from the editing alone, but additionally, I will now be choosing my next episode via a choice of 2 through a straw poll at the end of each video. So next week, we're going to be taking on the moon. But what would you rather see? A video of The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask, or a video of Sonic Adventure 2? The choice is up to you. Vote through the link in the description. I won't be counting comment votes because I can't keep track of them consistently. That being said, you're welcome to express your thoughts on your vote or in general the formula and the information from this video, but if you have any feedback you think I can improve the series with, then let me know as well. Otherwise, I will see you again this time next Friday on episode 3 of The Filmmaking Behind. I was tempted to call it Game by Frame or Every Game a Painting, but I feel for the title, The Filmmaking Behind gets the concept across best. But I thank you all for your name suggestions from the last episode, and shout out to Jonathan Garcia from the comments of episode 1 who helped me define in my mind what a motif is and what is a leitmotif. Hopefully I got it right this time. And also thanks to those who suggested games to take on, I've got them all listed. That Xenoblade video will come one day. Just gotta delve through 10 hours of cutscenes to find the ones I want to discuss. But that's a thing for the future. For now, my name's been Daz, you didn't really care, and I will see you in a bit.